There you go.
Yeah.
Hello, everyone. I'd like to commence tonight's meeting. I'd like to commence tonight's Select Board Monday, a Select Board meeting being held on Monday, January 9th, 2023, here in the Walk-White Meeting Room at the Mashpee Town Hall, 16 Great Neck Road North, Mashpee, Massachusetts, 02649. Broadcast live on local cable channel 18. Stream live on the town's Mashpee website. The time is now 6:30. We'd like to convene an open session by beginning with the Pledge of the Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I'd like to ask for a moment of silence for the town's lost quite a few people. Since my last presiding over the meeting, I'd like to mention a few names. Board member Carol Sherman's husband, Bill Sherman, passed on. Our condolences to her. Bill McKay, who also was a longtime resident of Mashpee, and Professor Brian Howes also, if we could have a moment's silence. Thank you. So at this time, I want to ask that for a motion to approve the meeting minutes from the December 19th, 2022 Monday night meeting.
So moved.
Second.
Hearing a first and second. Any discussion? Hearing none. Roll call vote. Michaela?
Yes.
Tom?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
Carol? No.
Stay. Was not here.
Carol abstains, and I abstain as well. That motion passes. Also, the December 19th executive session minutes, I'd entertain a motion to accept and approve
So
as
moved.
presented.
Second.
Hearing a first and second, any discussion? Hearing none. Carol?
I abstain.
Carol's an abstention. John?
Yes.
I'm an abstention. Tom?
Yes.
And Michaela?
Yes.
That too passes with 2 abstentions. Before we go into public comment, I would like to make a couple comments myself. We have quite a few here tonight. There is a presentation being done by Fuss and O'Neill on Santuit Pond boating and water quality. I will ask if folks are here to speak to that issue particularly. If you could hold off until after the presentation, we'll take comments after that so that everyone's informed with the latest information before we go into those public comments. The other thing that I ask is that, I will ask people to refrain from, lashing out at any particular board members or anything like that when delivering public comments. We want to be solution-based, and I think there's a lot of frustration with kind of state of the waters and things, and I anticipate some of the public comments are as a result of articles and things that have been put out recently, and, we have to come up with viable solutions to move forward. So I'd like to request people to be, mindful of personal affairs of everyone and what everyone's going through at this time. I know Carol's been through a devastating loss. So at this time, I'll go into public comment. The first one up is Richard Klein.
We just recently saw an article published in the New York Times regarding Mashpee and its water conditions. Dr. Howes, may he rest in peace, 4 years ago gave us a presentation on Mashpee dead waters and the eelgrass that cannot grow in our water. At that time, I asked for a moratorium on Title V and single-family homes. At present, yes, we have worked and we are getting our sewers eventually. But right now, we need something, as Dr. Howe said, to make it go away faster. And the only way I feel we can do that is by a moratorium so the waters can rejuvenate themselves for a couple of years. Let it start refreshing itself. Otherwise, it'll continue dying. You'll still have the same nitrogen load in our water beds, in our rivers that we have. If we get a moratorium, if we can stop it at this point, give it 2 years to rejuvenate itself, including the agriculture that's being done. That's all I've got to say. Thank you.
Thank you. I did fail to ask folks that come forward if you could please state your name for the record and your address. The next name on the list is Alan Waxman.
I will wait until after the presentation.
Thank you, Alan. Susan Dangle.
Good evening, and thank you for the opportunity to speak. I'm Susan Dangle of Cotuit Road. I'm also the president of Save Mashpee Wakeby Pond Alliance. I've been here before you on several occasions, and tonight, in a more somber note after the article that was posted in the New York Times. Mashpee's waters are its primary natural resource. The recent local comprehensive plan polling and working sessions have indicated that our waters and affordable housing are the highest priorities facing our community. We've achieved a huge milestone in the groundbreaking of our state-of-the-art wastewater treatment plant, which is a cause for celebration. Yet we've been dealt a dose of reality in recent days. This week, the New York Times exposed Mashpee's toxic stew to a worldwide audience. While the rest of the Cape shares our woes, eyes will surely be focused on Mashpee. And the fallout from this article has yet to be determined. Over the weekend, members of Save Mashpee Wakeby Pond Alliance, Mashpee Clean Waters, Envision Mashpee, Mashpee Environmental Coalition, the Mashpee Wakeby Lake Management Committee, and the newly formed Mashpee Ponds Coalition gathered to discuss this crisis, and we do feel it's a crisis. We seemed to have momentum in 2021 when a unanimous vote approved our sewering, but we still have an appearance of floundering. A roundtable discussion of regulatory boards was called in November of 2021, and a robust dialogue took place. Yet it also highlighted the fact that these groups must work in concert for us to be successful in cleaning our water. How often have these boards talked to each other since that time? I haven't seen another roundtable. As a result, articles prepared for town meetings and warrants to further our nitrogen and phosphorus removal have consistently, since 2021, been pulled from the warrant at the last minute, as there is too much confusion over the articles and their impacts. With you confused, citizens are more confused. The groups here tonight have a grassroots reach. We stand ready to help and engage the public and explain this toxic situation that we find ourselves in, but the key is having reliable information. you need to provide it. Shockingly, on December 8th, I learned at the sewer meeting that the request to change the phases of the sewer plan, although we've got the money to pay for this change, will take 1.5 to 2 years to complete. 2 years to complete a new study, and then we have to design it, and then we have to find the money for it. This is simply unacceptable. Did we all know that this decision would delay this whole project to this extent? I'll finish up quickly. Faced with either the stringent new DEP regulations regarding Title V or the return of Conservation Law Foundation's lawsuit against our town, we must do better. We must move faster. To do this, we need consistent, reliable information. If you feel we're on the right track, we need to know it. We need to know where we stand, and we need to understand our goals and whether or not we are reducing our nitrogen. Can we do a 75% reduction in 20 years? Pleasant Bay seems to think they can do it. 4 towns on the Cape voluntarily in 2018 entered into a watershed permit with no regulation facing them. They have 5 years of data on what they're doing collectively as 4 towns to save their bay. And yes, they approved a fertilizer ban in Orleans in October. Let's follow their lead. Time is of the essence. Thank you.
Thank you. George Schmidt.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll defer till after the presentation.
Okay, George. Mary Wager.
Good evening, Mary Wagon, 35 Ashumet Road. I have 2 things to talk about tonight. The first one is an important forum being held this Wednesday, January 11th. The Cape Cod Salties Sport Fishing Club is hosting a forum regarding Holtec International's plan to discharge over 1 million gallons of radioactive tainted wastewater from the Pilgrim Nuclear Power Plant into Cape Cod Bay. Cape Cod Salties Sport Fishing Club is hosting this forum on Holtec on January 11th at 6:30 at the Yarmouth Senior Center, 528 Forest Road in West Yarmouth, and all are welcome. My second item is to talk about the recent New York Times newspaper article. When I prepared my comments, at that point, it had been picked up nationwide. This newspaper article, and I'm seriously concerned about Mashpee being branded a smelly, polluted place with negative impacts on our brand and our local economy. In response, I hope that the town will declare 2023 Mashpee's Clean Water Year, and to deploy every tool we have in the toolbox to improve our water quality. Continue with the sewering, increased setbacks of structures from wetlands, stronger stormwater management limits on fertilizer use, and protecting Mashpee from large developments, whether they're sited in town or upstream in other towns. Last May, we beefed up our low-impact development requirements in our zoning bylaw, and we still have time to place articles on the May 2023 warrant. Speaking as the chair of the planning board, I'm ready to help and support these efforts. For example, the setback bylaw is really not that difficult to prepare and engage the community. And by the way, I think the public is already engaged. We had a virtual session on the local comprehensive plan this Saturday. And again, clean waters was the overarching theme. I call on you to embrace the support, and let's make significant progress in 2023 to clean our polluted waters. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Brian Everett.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll defer.
Jason Fisher. Joe Appleman. Paul Canoni. Paul Canoni.
Sir, I have questions that I'd like
Fussin' O'Neill, is that a possibility?
You can do that after the presentation.
That's what I'd like to do.
Okay. Thank you. Nathan Adams?
I'd like to wait till after the presentation.
Lynn Barbie?
Lynn Barbie, Surf Drive. I'm going to echo what some other folks have mentioned, but I want to take a slightly different approach. I know that a lot of people in our community make their living in real estate. We see it in the Mashpee Enterprise, lots of ads, a full page. It's an important business for a number of people. But I also see that in the Boston Globe, we're trying to sell a new Seabury house for $9,995,000 and a Mashpee house on Daniels Island for $6,950,000, again, from realtors. I just would like to posit that for many of us who are really trying very hard to do everything we can to address our water crisis, whether it's setbacks or power boats or whatever we can do. And I know that there are realtors who have been resistant to that. And I would just say to them and to you, what's going to make it difficult for these folks to make a living is more of the kind of publicity we just got in the New York Times. It's not further setbacks. It's not making it a little bit more restrictive about where you can build and what you can build. It's the fact that people who want to come to this town want to be able to swim in the ocean, not just in the pool in their backyard, which I do not have, by the way. But we need to think with a much more long-term vision, and we need to take everything that we can possibly do, all the tools, everything that would work, the sewering and everything else, and address the water crisis so that these people can still make a living and the rest of us can enjoy the waters. Thank you.
Thank you. Paul Pasaris? Eric Horn?
Yes, sir, I'd like to wait till after the presentation.
Thank you. That's all of those registered for public comment. Moving on. We did have a public hearing scheduled for 6:35. We're running late for that. I'd like to commence the public hearing. If our clerk would read the public notice.
Pursuant to Chapter 138, Section 16A of the Massachusetts General Bylaws, the Board of Selectmen acting at the locating, authorizing, will hold a public hearing on the subject alcohol beverages license amendment application of QVCC, Inc., doing business as Quashnet Valley Country Club, 309 Old Barnstable Road, Mashpee, Mass. 02649, for a change of management. Said hearing will be held on Monday, January 9th, 2023, at 6:35 PM in the McCoy Meeting Room at Mashpee Town Hall, 16 Great Neck Road, North, Mashpee, Mass. 02649. You may submit comments and any questions via email or at boston@bostonmashpee.com.gov prior to the meeting date and time.
Thank you. So this is just a standard change of
Yes.
manager. We've seen these before. Does anyone, any members of the board have questions or concerns with this?
I do not.
At this time, I'd like to open it up to the public. Does anyone from the public have concerns with this public hearing? The license amendment for Quashnet Valley Country Club?
I make a motion to close the public hearing.
Second.
Hearing a motion to close the public hearing, a first and second. Any discussion on that? Hearing none. Michaela?
Yes.
Tom?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
Carol? And I'm a yes as well. The motion to close the public hearing is unanimous. At this time, hearing no discussion, I'll open it up for a second round. Any,
I make a motion to change managers,
I'll second that motion.
the Quashnet.
hearing a first and second, any discussion on that? Hearing none. Carol?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
Tom?
Yes.
Michaela?
Yes.
I'm a yes as well. That motion is unanimous and passes.
Grace. Good luck. Thank you.
Next item, we have a poll hearing for, provided by Verizon slash Eversource, petition number Mass 2022-31 for Red Brick Road at a location 875 feet west of the center line of Bryan's Lane.
I believe Don was supposed to be here for Eversource. I'm sorry, Verizon, I apologize.
No offense.
I get them mixed up all the time. But the public hearing, we're just here to, if you have any questions, or if anybody from the public has any questions on it, and if not, if you'd vote to approve. Correct?
Correct.
There's no changes or anything. It's exactly what it is.
Exactly what it is, yep.
Any members of the board have questions or concerns with this item?
Do not.
I thought it was pretty straightforward myself. Hearing none, I'd entertain a motion to accept and approve the proposal
So moved.
as presented.
Second.
Hearing a first and second, any discussion? None? Carol?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
Yes.
Tom?
Yes.
Michaela, it's a yes. I'm a yes as well. All those present were unanimous. That motion passes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good luck.
Thank you.
Next up, we have discussion on approval of the 2023 seasonal population estimate. Town planner, Evan Leher.
Actually, sir, he's not here this evening, so if there are any questions that the board has relative to the memo, then I'll have to have him in at another time.
This just states that we have our summer population increased by 574.
That's it.
So, I mean,
Yeah, pretty straightforward.
we need a vote.
Yeah, I thought it was pretty straightforward as myself. I was a little surprised that it was
Only.
only that
Me
much.
too.
I thought,
I would have
That's summer.
expected it higher.
Summer.
correct.
Yeah.
Okay. That requires no further action.
No, I need to require the vote to accept it, yeah.
Motion to approve.
Motion to
The
approve.
estimated
I'll
peak
second.
population of 36,825 persons.
Second.
Hearing a first and second for the motion, any discussion? Hearing none. Michaela?
Yes.
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 John?
Yes.
Carol?
Yes.
I'm a yes as well. That motion's unanimous to accept and approve that memo and that population counts. Discussion and possible action on Community Preservation Act Committee disc golf application presented by Drew McManus as president of the association. Thank you.
Thanks, Joe.
Thank you. Drew McManus, Town of Mashpee Conservation Agent. First, just want to extend my sincere condolences to you, Carol, for your loss, and to the family and friends of Brian Howes and Bill McKay. I knew Bill for a number of years. He was a long-term steward of our Mashpee River woodlands and really synonymous with that area of town. And just a little off topic from this presentation, I do want to establish some form of memorial for Bill McKay somewhere in the Mashpee River woodlands that he was a steward for a number of years, so.
Great idea.
Yeah.
Like it a lot.
So I'm here tonight before you to propose the establishment of a disc golf course in the town of Mashpee. I'm a member of our local Cape Cod Disc Golf Club, and the club was established back in 2011. Cape Cod had, back then, one disc golf course located at Burgess Park in the town of Barnstable, in the village of Marston's Mills, 18-hole course. And the club was formed basically as a stewardship entity for that disc golf course. And since then, we've hosted a number of events, leagues, disc golf leagues, tournaments, charity fundraising events. We are a nonprofit organization under the umbrella of a regional organization called the New England Flying Disc Golf Association, which is a 501c3 nonprofit organization. So the club was essentially formed just to promote the sport of disc golf throughout Cape Cod and southeastern Massachusetts to any entity that's willing to listen and learn more about the sport. Disc golf, in your packets, we have a description of what the sport's all about. In a nutshell, the sport is very similar to ball golf, but the biggest difference between disc golf and ball golf is the establishment and creation of course and the methodology involved. As you know, creating a golf course requires extensive land clearing, establishment of high maintenance turf, irrigation, a lot of significant alteration of the land. Disc golf is really quite at the opposite end of the spectrum when it comes to implementing a course. It's really kind of meant to be blended in with the natural setting to the greatest extent possible. So when you think of what a disc golf course would look like, is similar to a trail system, only slightly modified from that. As far as the rules, they are the exact same as regular golf. The equipment is obviously different. Your hand is essentially the club, and there's a variety of different discs, which we have a club member here today. Todd Kep is one of our club members. He's brought some visual aids for us, and these are different types of discs that are labeled similar to regular. Do you want to pull out like a driver and a mid-range? Huh? So they're categorized similarly as golf clubs, but these are different from what you would normally see for typical frisbees when you hear the word frisbee, like Whammo. These are much smaller, they're more aerodynamically shaped, but they come in the same categories as regular golf. So you've got putters, which are kind of these smooth, rounded edge discs for putt and approach. Mid-range, which is a slightly more sharpened edge. Similar to an iron. And then you've got your driver disc, which is a sharp-edged disc, which flies obviously the furthest.
Wow.
And then there's different molds and plastics and all kinds of variations off those three main categories of discs. They come in different grades of plastic, price ranges anywhere from $15 on up to $35, $40 per disc, and they can last literally for years before you have to replace them, unless you really like hitting trees multiple times, then they may not last quite as long. But that's the basic equipment. And then the target, which is called a basket or a pole hole, is a metal structure that's buried into a sleeve underground, usually 2 to 3 feet, set in concrete. And then it rises out of the ground, a center pole about 4 feet. Midway up is a metal basket, and then a spoke at the top with chains that hang down. So the object is to throw the disc into the chains, and it falls into the basket, much like a ball in regular golf, the ball going into the cup. So same kind of process and idea. The scoring or the distances on for Frisbee golf or disc golf are measured in feet, not yards. So, you know, a par 3 hole would be anywhere from 150 to 300 feet. Par 4 would be 400 to 700 feet, and then a par 5, 700 plus feet. There's no actual rule as far as what par, how it relates to length in feet, but that's a general kind of description of what you would see. And any given course should have a nice variety of par 3s, 4s, and maybe a couple of par 5s, depending on how much land you have to work with. But essentially, it's a very environmentally friendly activity. It's open to all different ages and skill levels and abilities, which is what really attracted me to the sport, in that I think it's, when you look at the town's typical recreational venues, you've got sports courts and you've got athletic fields. And then obviously you've got recreational activities on town conservation lands that are, you know, more passive, like hiking and dog walking and bird watching and those sorts of things. So I think disc golf, if suitable land can be found, really can provide a tremendous benefit, a recreational benefit to any town. And I'm of the belief that even though it's kind of off the radar right now compared to your more typical types of recreational venues, particularly pickleball nowadays, I know that's just taken off like, phew. But disc golf has too. It's right there with pickleball as far as growth nationwide and throughout the world. But when you look at the cost that's associated with installing a disc golf course compared to your standard sports courts or athletic fields, and moreover, the maintenance and overhead costs of a disc golf course compared to those other types of activities is significantly lower. And it's a broader appeal to a variety of, like I said, ages and skill levels. And also, an 18-hole disc golf course can cycle through up to 72 people at any given time. When you're looking at sports courts, you usually have to wait to get onto the court or reserve a time. Athletic fields, you know, there's certain criteria to be able to use the field. So a disc golf course, in terms of usership and cycling through recreational usage at any given period of time during the year, and it is a year-round sport, is significantly higher than these other recreational opportunities. I'm not bashing those activities. I'm just giving you a perspective on cost-benefit analysis for what you get for the cost to install a course. So I did include in the packet that you have, there's a line item budget breakdown. That's for an 18-hole course, but I've also provided some different land areas that I've identified in the town. The number one criterion in trying to find suitable land is that it has first of all, no rare species habitat, that there's nearby established parking, and that it's not an environmentally sensitive area. It's going to be a wooded setting, so there will be some level of disturbance, but I can't emphasize enough, this is nothing like regular golf in terms of disturbance, nothing like it. It's really like establishing a trail system with some additional appurtenances like a tee area and, as I described, the basket or the target. Other than that, you really want to keep the scenic value of the landscape as much as you can. Highlighting environmental aspects of the landscape. So disc golf is really a great way to not only get people outdoors and appreciate the outdoors, but get healthy exercise in the process. So it's a way of kind of getting people to enjoy the outdoor setting more so, and having fun while they're doing it. So, and courses can be, you know, designed to incorporate landscape features to highlight them through educational signage. So there's a variety of things that you can do when you're creating a disc golf course that not only can provide public appeal, but education as well about our environment. So I think with that, I did provide what I kind of prioritize is what would be, I feel, the most suitable parcels of land, and you should all have GIS snapshot maps of each one of those. One of them being right next to Town Hall here, and the wooded land between here and Goodspeed Road and Meeting House Road is a kind of combination of open space, town open space, none of which are designated conservation land. They're just your discretion, town-owned open space, unused space. The issue with this parcel over here is that I believe it is on the kind of wish list for affordable housing, which I am 100% in favor of. However, there still could be opportunity to use a portion of that land for a disc golf course. So one of the things in talking with Evan Lara, the town planner, is he has suggested that maybe the selectmen may want to do some form of feasibility study for this parcel over here when it comes to affordable housing, and see if disc golf may be able to fit in along with that for any portion of the land that may not be used for affordable housing. The other two locations are, one of them is South Mashpee at 101 Red Brook Road, which is the parcel that's currently associated with the fire substation, the cell tower, and from what I've heard, a possible location for a sewer substation as well. So that's kind of, each one of these parcels has other contingencies, but I still think they're perfectly viable locations for a disc golf course. The third option is right across the street here at Veterans Park. There's a small wooded parcel that separates Veterans Park from the Mashpee Community Gardens. It's a much smaller parcel. It's only 4 or 5 acres. But again, to at least begin to expose the town to disc golf, that could be a consideration if the other two parcels aren't viable. So it could be a place for what we refer to as a pocket course, where you could put in like 5 to 6 holes, provide a nice, brief recreational opportunity. It has nearby parking, just like the parcel over here at Veterans Park. So that's another option to kind of get disc golf exposed to the town. Obviously, I would prefer to establish either a 9 or an 18-hole course and land that's suitable for that, but it is something that I thought, should be taken into consideration if we can't find land suitable for, a 9 or an 18-hole layout. So that's pretty much my presentation in a nutshell, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
So I know I, for one, had no idea what disc golf was. I had to Google it, much like pickleball. But, looking over the proposals and such, I did have, I guess, with the nature of the way you explain the courses are created, I guess I didn't really fully understand why the Ashumet Road would be taken off of the table for consideration.
Right.
If there's rare species in the area, from the way that you described it, I don't know what exactly is being affected, what type of species are being captured over there. All of Cape Cod's a turtle habitat.
Sure.
Aside from that, I'm not completely familiar with what's over there for rare species.
Yeah, it is, eastern box turtle is a species of concern there. Not necessarily taking that off the table. These areas were what I prioritized as my first choices. I wouldn't say that Ashumet Road is off the table, but if there was an opportunity to find land that was not mapped as rare species habitat, that would obviously be my preference. I do understand that, the Natural Heritage did review that land for the establishment of the pickleball courts and the dog park, and they allowed it. And because we're not looking at structure on the level of either of those areas, that maybe it would be approved by Natural Heritage. There's also, I know, some neighborhood concerns in that area, some neighbors that may have an issue with additional activities in that area, so that was kind of taken into consideration too. But I didn't feel that, and parking is another thing too. There is established parking just up the street at the satellite lot for the park, but we wouldn't want to use any of the parking spaces associated with the dog park or the pickleball court, because I just see that as a conflict moving forward if either of those areas were to be opened up to disc golf parking, because I can tell you that once a course is established, it's not long before it starts to become popular. We established a course in the town of Sandwich just 2 years ago at Oak Crest Cove, and already we're seeing, daily parking there daily. Not anything significant, but it's going to grow. So I don't think that the parking areas established for the dog park or pickleball court should be used for disc golf if that parcel were to be chosen. But the satellite lot across the street could be used for that purpose, or more parking could be created. But again, I'd rather use existing parking than have to create new parking and clear more land for that. So I'm trying to be on the conservative end of this approach and taking advantage of areas that have established parking and the least amount of restrictions in general.
I know for me, and I'll wrap up so we can get to other members' questions and concerns, is that, you know, I really kind of am hung up on the idea of concentrating recreational activities around the hub of our recreation
Sure.
area. And, you know, I guess as, in regards to the parking, you know, because this is a kind of low-impact type of construction, you know, I didn't know if it would be viable and cost-effective to kind of put crushed stone, you know, cut a few more trees along the roadway.
Right.
Put some crushed stone and park along the roadway.
Sure.
You know, it seemed like it could be mitigated, and, you know, the selling point being the rare species, you know, it's all sand on Cape Cod, so I mean, eastern box turtles are everywhere. And if they approve the pickleball court, I don't see why they wouldn't approve this.
Sure.
But I think
Rather
what-
than opening up other areas in town and having recreation kind of spread out all over the place. I do like the idea of having, you know, it concentrated in the one area.
Yeah, understood 100% on that, yeah.
Town manager, you had
I
something?
do have a question, and you're going to have to forgive my ignorance here. What is the noise level as a result of this? Because I've been known to endure a couple complaints at the pickleball court, so, and I'm not saying that's a bad location, I'm not saying it's a good location. I'm just wondering, what is the level of noise, and how much does it carry? What's the proximity?
A lot less than pickleball.
So,
less.
yeah.
I'm not knocking your pickleball.
Yeah, it's pretty minor overall. I mean, you're talking about the occasional ching sound of the plastic hitting the chains when it falls in the basket, but it's not a frequent sound that you hear like every other 5 to 10 seconds or every other second. So it's very, very minimal. Typically, from my experience in playing a variety of courses, not only here in the state, throughout New England and throughout the country, disc golfers tend to be of the same etiquette and noise level as regular golfers. So, you know, pretty quiet overall, I would say.
So it's not as intense as pickleball?
No. Not even on the same level as far as, you know, I mean, you might get an occasional shout at a really well-thrown shot for, you know, a hole-in-one or a, you know, an eagle or a birdie occasionally, but it's infrequent and for the most part, a very quiet activity.
Thank you.
Yeah.
But I understand what you're saying about the parking, because it is popular.
Yep.
I drive by the Burgess Park every day in the summer, and there's quite a crowd there
Right.
for disc golf.
Yeah.
So what Drew's saying is he doesn't want to infringe on taking parking away from pickleball or the dog park, I think, too. That's why I think he's come up
So
with
that would
other
be
locations.
something that, you know, at least I would recommend, if, let's just say that's the parcel that's chosen, that there be signage or maybe additional to existing signage that makes it crystal clear that these facilities are for those uses only, so that nobody, you know, that's there to play pickleball parks in those areas. That's a huge concern of mine with that parcel. I don't want to interfere with the existing activities.
And I appreciate that.
So I think it's just, but you can deal with that with, you know, adequate signage and obvious signage that just says for these activities only. And if we were allowed to use the satellite lot there just up the street, which is very reasonable walking distance from there to that location, I think that would be more than enough parking for any anticipated use in that.
John?
Yeah, I actually get to agree with, you know, David and Carol, actually, but very much think that a Schumett is the right location for so many reasons.
Sure.
I played both. I played pickleball often.
Right.
And I've actually played disc golf or a
That's the
few
right term.
times. So, and I do think having the parking lot for the fields across the street, right there, could be like overflow. If for some reason you had a tournament or whatever.
Right.
I think it would work out great. They actually recently have cleared some trees along the back side of the pickleball courts, because we've actually had some excess parking issues and concerns.
Yep.
So I think that's gonna accommodate and solve the problems there. But there always seems to be enough parking between there and the dog park. There's always a few extra spots.
Yeah,
Adding some, additional parking, but having the fields, and like you said, David, the outdoor recreational area, it's just, I think it's just a perfect location.
Yeah.
So that would be highly in favor of
Okay.
that location. And I could see these other locations, I could see reasons why would you want to do it and then have 3 years later have a situation where we're looking at affordable housing or whatever.
Right.
And if you want to put a small place across the street, that doesn't sound like that's like the greatest outcome.
right, it's the
So-
least desired
Right.
option.
But having the outdoor one location, I think it would be a great thing for the town of Mashpee.
Thank you.
I'll jump in. And I agree. I think this is something that you've presented in the past. Timing's perfect on this. I think this is the way to go. Provides more exercise for all ages of individuals here.
Right.
Parking is not an issue that I can see at all. You have my blessings on this one. I think this is a great idea. Timing's perfect.
Thank you.
Michaela?
I have nothing further to add.
I don't know if you could explore, consideration of, and maybe modifying the application to include, shoulder parking with crushed stone.
Yeah,
I
some
would
of the-
anticipate it being a very minimal cost. I think it's pretty level over that area.
Right.
You
Yeah, I
know,
can talk to DPW, Catherine, and see what the cost estimate would be. The line item budget that you have there does take into account contingency funding for parking. So that was because that was the original location that I had in mind. I just wanted to kind of provide other options and get your feedback before I said, this is number one, or this is still in play, or, in terms of priority of land. But I do understand where you're coming from, particularly, the point of trying to get all the recreational activities into a hub, like you said, makes perfect sense. But again, I'm always leery of, restrictions and things of that nature. So path of least resistance is always going to be the first choice. But happy to, amend to make that the parcel of top priority.
I guess the other thing I have is, with the housing shortage that we have, taking other parcels off the table from other areas for recreational purposes like this, I just can't kind of get behind that.
Right.
Where this is right in our recreational hub.
Sure.
It's just, I guess that's the only way I'd support it myself personally.
Okay.
Is if it was over there, if we could make it work there.
The purpose of this meeting, what I expected, was to get your feedback on what you felt is a suitable location. That's really what I was looking for. I should have included that. I didn't mean to exclude it completely. I was just looking at some of the issues of that parcel compared to other ones, and maybe they're not real issues, maybe they are. But that was the only reason it was kind of left off this presentation specifically, but it's not off the table, so.
Mr. Banish?
I do know that there could be some voting here on Saturdays, so I am a little concerned about the parking, and certainly I wouldn't want to infringe upon the employee parking during the week.
Right.
So I think there's some things to discuss. Maybe we'll have a discussion of bylaws, and also
Sure.
we'll get going on this.
Now, you need a vote from us on this?
I'd like to
Tonight,
have a
too.
discussion offline and come back with some proposals for the board to consider. I'd like to speak to the DPW director, which I haven't yet. I'd like to speak to a couple of other folks, and I think this all can be worked out. I just want to, and I'm not convinced that we need a feasibility study, but I would like to just take a look at some options and then come back.
One of the questions I would have though is, and I understand that, I agree. The timing with CPA, because we also have an application in, and I apologize, I did a little cart before the horse here, only because we're up against
Where's Lynn?
CPA
You
deadline.
get the cat?
CPA deadline was coming up fast when this idea kind of was hatched. So I submitted an application for funding, and CPA is looking, for you as the board to at least give some form of endorsement or approval for land, maybe not specific land, but just for the concept of a course in the town. So maybe if that's a possibility of a vote of endorsement for the purposes of CPA, because I'm kind of up against two different deadlines here when it comes to the next town meeting, so.
I thought I read, that's what I read into it, was that they were waiting on us to identify a location
Right.
to move forward with the approval.
Right.
Recommendation to move
So
forward.
would we have time to do that,
So
considering?
that was
their-
one of my
Yeah,
concerns.
if we had a discussion, when's your next meeting, January 21st? 23rd.
So, yeah, I think that still works, because February, I forgot the exact date, early February is CPA, yeah.
Oh, that's perfect.
Okay.
I respectfully request that you table it until then.
A motion to table
So
until
moved.
our next meeting.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor of tabling this till our next meeting?
Yeah, yes.
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 Say aye. All right.
Thank you very much.
Sure,
That handout I gave you is just an article that I found was pretty interesting about the economic benefits associated with disc golf, so take a look at it at your leisure. They
Thank you.
misprinted, they called it disco golf, it's actually disc golf.
Great. Great presentation, Drew. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Presentation and discussion of potential bylaw amendment warrant article with regard to horsepower and speed restrictions on Santuit Pond. The Department of Natural Resources Director Ashley Fisher and Fussin O'Neill as representatives. Hello, Ashley.
Evening. So just wanted to let you know, tonight is strictly for educational purposes. We are not looking to receive any type of approval from the Select Board. I also wanted to let you know that tonight is a discussion in regards to boating and water quality for Santuit Pond. There's nothing to do with the parking lot being constructed on Santuit or Timber Lane. And also, I wanted to let you know that this is a series of public engagement sessions that I will be conducting. We will also be letting abutters know via certified mail. So I've actually requested a 300-foot buffer around Santuit Pond to let those abutters know of any potential bylaw changes that will come to the Maytown meeting warrant. So with that, I'll let you, this is Diane and Eric Moss. They are from Fussin O'Neill. They are consultants through the Municipal Vulnerability Preparedness Program. They are also helping us with the second round through the Municipal Vulnerability Preparedness Program, where we'll be constructing stormwater improvements on Timber Lane and Lantern Lane. Diane?
Thanks, Ashley. Thanks for having us tonight and giving us the opportunity to talk to you a little bit about the work that we did through the MVP grant and to share some information around water quality in Santuit Pond. So I wanted to start off, so I'm Diane Moss. I'm the Chief Resilience and Sustainability Officer at Fussin O'Neill. I'm a water resources engineer by education. I've been studying bacteria and water quality and cyanobacteria for a number of years. And my first involvement with Santuit Pond actually goes back to the DPH sampling that started around 2010 and work related to that. So I was well aware of Santuit Pond's algal bloom issues prior to our involvement with the Municipal Vulnerability Preparedness Program, and was really excited that we could be of assistance to the town and helping address, what is really a serious issue for you all. So to just go ahead and kind of set the groundwork for that. For folks who may not be as familiar with the harmful algal bloom issues in Santuit Pond, there's a long history of significant cyanobacteria. And here I'll use cyanobacteria and harmful algal bloom sort of interchangeably in Santuit Pond. You can see the list on the right side that was compiled as part of the Santuit Pond watershed-based plan, which was recently completed by others, sort of listing the advisories that were issued for the pond. And that, I think, sort of does a nice job of sort of laying out some of that history there. So cyanobacteria blooms, or harmful algal blooms, or HABs as they're sometimes called, have potential environmental and human health impacts. And they tend to appear most often in warm and phosphorus-rich waters. Those conditions encourage blooms, and they're anticipated to increase in the future because of the increasing temperatures that we've seen, the longer growing season, the warmer summer temperatures, and also increases in overall precipitation and in the intensity of that precipitation, which creates more runoff, which can then deliver more nutrients, more phosphorus and nitrogen to the ponds. And that was how the Municipal Vulnerability Preparedness Grant sort of came to be, because the purpose of that program is to help make communities more resilient to anticipated changes that we're seeing here in Massachusetts, across the country, around the world, in terms of things like temperature and precipitation. So the sources of phosphorus in Santuit Pond, the first look at that really comprehensively goes back to 2010 when there was a diagnostic feasibility study done for the pond. And to summarize it very simply, the sources are both external and they're internal. So the external sources come from the watershed. That's about 22% or so of the what we call the loading, or the load of phosphorus that comes into the pond itself. And that's from a variety of sources. That's from septic systems, from fertilizer runoff, stormwater runoff, waterfowl, anything sort of external to the pond. But then there's also internal sources, and that's the majority of the loading of phosphorus to the pond in Santuit. And that comes primarily from the accumulated bottom sediment. And that sediment's been collecting, for a long time. There's about 8 feet depth of accumulated sediment in some areas. That's from the recent Army Corps of Engineers work in the pond. It comes from a combination of things: past and present land use, agricultural use, residential use that creates runoff, that delivers sediment to the pond. But it also comes from these blooms dying off and then redepositing into the sediment at the bottom of the pond. And that's particularly important because that top about 1.5 inches, or about 4 centimeters of that top sediment layer is what we call the active layer. And if you talk to limnologists who have worked on the pond, they'll say, well, the active layer is about 4 centimeters, and that's where the opportunity for phosphorus exchange with the overlying water, takes place. So how does this internal phosphorus in the sediment get back into the pond, into the water? How does it feed these blooms? And there's a combination of factors. It can be released from the bottom sediment itself, from that active layer, under certain conditions. We particularly see that when there's lower oxygen. That allows for that phosphorus to be released. But we can also see it when there's resuspension of phosphorus-rich sediment back into the water column. So in addressing the sources of phosphorus, if the sources are internal and external, then the solutions that we have, and I heard a couple people mention the idea of like tools in the toolbox, and I love that idea, because that's exactly what we try to do when we approach a water body and think about what are the array of tools that we have available to us, what can we do? So the solutions also can be internal or external, and ideally you're using all of those solutions. You want to use all the tools that you can have available to you. So externally, managing the lands in the watershed, thinking about stormwater runoff, and that's been the focus of the town's latest MVP grant on Timber Lane. Looking at fertilizer reduction, looking at septic systems being properly maintained and operating, functioning properly, looking at sewering. All things that the community's thought about, is thinking about, is talking about. And then there's also internal ways to deal with the phosphorus that's there. Remember, this is about that 8-foot depth of muck that's accumulated over decades and decades. You can remove that sediment. That also adds depth. So that's one possibility. You take the source away, physically take the source away. You can also limit the release of the phosphorus. In some cases, that can be through a treatment like alum treatment. The solar bees that were put in place, the idea behind those was to provide some aeration and circulation that would get oxygen to that bottom area so the phosphorus wouldn't be released, because there are periods where there is no oxygen at the bottom of the pond, even as shallow as it is. And then the other thing is you can minimize resuspension, especially of the top layer of that sediment. Keep that sediment in place, don't allow it to get back up into the water column. So all of those are, a brief summary, and obviously there's a multitude of literature and a lot of information, but in one slide, that's sort of a summary of what are your tools in your toolbox. So our job as part of the fiscal year 22 MVP grant was to look at all of Mashpee's bylaws, regulations, policies that related in some way to water quality, in particular to nutrient control, and look for opportunities and look for recommendations that we could make to both protect water quality, particularly related to nutrients, and particularly looking at Santuit Pond, and also enhancing climate resilience, because that's a function of the grant. That's a key core piece of what the grant is about. So again, it's to help you find those tools in your toolbox. And from that came, a variety. There's a whole memo on what the various recommendations were, but the one that we're really here to talk about tonight and to share information about is this one about motorized boating on Santuit Pond and reducing the potential for resuspension of those top layer of sediment in particular by limiting horsepower associated with motors. The research on water quality impacts associated with this topic, there are multiple studies. I've listed some sources there. I'm happy to share full citations with folks. There are multiple studies that demonstrate that mixing depth, different mixing depths associated with different horsepowers of motorized boats. In particular, the higher the horsepower, the deeper the mixing depth. And I'll show some photos in a minute to kind of help you visualize what I'm saying with that. And that provides a potential to resuspend that sediment, possibly releasing phosphorus back into the water column. And in particular, the research has been concerned around shallow lakes and that being problematic. And Santuit is shallow, I think, as we all would acknowledge. So to give you a visual for that, this is a really interesting to those of us that are sort of into this issue, really interesting YouTube video from the Wisconsin Extension, looking at the impacts of motorized watercraft on Wisconsin lakes. And I'm really showing this to just give you a visual of what I'm talking about and what we're talking about when we say the potential for motors of different horsepower to disturb that sediment. And you can see we go from, sort of our existing conditions, if you will, on the left. There's a motorboat introduced, and there's sediment resuspension on the right. And that's, I'm not indicating this is any particular depth, any particular that this is analogous in an exact way to Santuit, but it's more to give you a visual of what are we talking about when we say there's the potential for resuspension. What does that look like visually? Because it can sound very, very abstract. But do check out the video if you're interested in the topic, because it is pretty interesting. So in looking at that and thinking about, what's that tool in the toolbox here that we might have, maximum depth from the latest state fish and wildlife mapping shows that the maximum depth is maybe around 11 feet. You can see overall it's very shallow. There's large areas of the pond that are less than 8 feet. And the sort of correlation between horsepower and mixing depth. So when you have a certain motor of a certain horsepower, how deep in the water column is that churning? We see that, the literature review, there's a couple references there, but that a 10 horsepower motor typically has a mixing depth of about 6 feet. So in a very shallow pond, the concern becomes, how are we mixing that water column? How are we resuspending that bottom sediment? And what is the potential impact for phosphorus release? So thinking about, again, all the tools in the toolbox of how do we limit both internal and external sources, this is one possibility. So thinking about the proposed bylaw and what's the precedent for a bylaw like that, because I think it's important to understand that too. So the purpose would be to protect water quality in Santuit Pond, just focused on Santuit, to allow for continued safe recreational use, fishing, swimming, boating, to continue to happen, and to protect the health of the users of the pond. What would it restrict? The proposal that the department is thinking about at the current time is to look at, to set a threshold for motors of a certain horsepower, and to also eliminate the use of internal combustion engines, which provides an additional water quality protection, get away from spills, use of gasoline, that sort of thing. What would it still allow? Electric motors that are at or below the particular threshold, and also, of course, non-motorized boats. Restrictions such as this are allowable by state law, Mass General Law 131, Section 45, and there are similar restrictions and protections both here on the Cape. I think there's about 10 communities that have horsepower restrictions, and of course throughout Massachusetts as a whole. And I'm just going to stop there, we'd be happy to take questions from the board, and of course, if you care to open it, we're fine with that as well.
Yeah, I have a real problem with the first sentence. Actually, it says, protect water quality in Santuit Pond to allow continued safe recreation of swimming? Like, you can't swim in
Right,
it.
you're not correct. I understand that.
In fact,
Right.
it's the water is, quality is so
Yeah, I
poor.
would not recommend swimming, but in thinking about recreational use, contact, non-contact swimming, under certain conditions that would, or contact, non-contact recreational use, under conditions that were appropriate.
Because we're advised now, I mean, I live in Santuit
Yeah.
Woods, so my understanding was you don't even want to have that come
I
in
would-
contact with your skin.
I wouldn't recommend it. Well, definitely
It's-
when there's an active bloom, and it's worth remembering that even when the bloom subsides.
you get
that there's
closer
still
to
the
the mic,
potential-
please?
Oh, I'm sorry. That even when the bloom subsides, there's still the potential, for algal toxins to be present in the water column. So you're correct. Yes, I agree.
Yeah, so I guess my
Go
other
swimming.
comment, I'll just, if you can't swim in it, I understand they use it for fishing tournament, but they don't, I hope no one's eating the fish. Please, don't eat the fish.
And then
So-
voting.
So they're boating and fishing and releasing. So unfortunately, I haven't heard any good answers about how we're going to clean it up. So unless we're going to clean it up, it's just dirty water, so, I don't know, I'm kind of frustrated because,
Sure. So I'll offer a couple observations. The problem with the issues that Santuit is having did not happen overnight. They're not going to
Right.
go away overnight. It's going to take multiple of those tools in the toolkit. This is one. This may be one that the community decides on. It may be one they decide not to do. There's a variety of things that you need to be looking at and thinking about as a community. I'll also say, we can remember, and so any water quality issue never gets solved immediately. It takes decades of working on this problem, because it took decades to get you here. We may remember, some of us who are old enough, the governor at the time, which I think was Governor Weld, talking about the Charles River and how bad the Charles River was. And that has come a long, long way in the intervening decades since Governor Weld was in office. And it's going to take a long time. So in part, your job as a community and what you're called upon, I guess, to do is also think about, what do you want the legacy of the pond to be? And how do you set that up for future generations to maybe get to that point where you can address the severity of the water quality issues, and certainly not make it any worse? So we're looking at both things. We're looking at trying to hold the line, but also trying to make improvements. And that's going to take many different things to do that.
Excuse me. So we've discussed this for years now. And the one thing that I can recall, and it comes up every time, is that they have a great number of failed wastewater treatment systems surrounding the pond. If we don't clear that up, how do we ever intend to stop the contamination of the water? we have to go in there and remove those failed systems and put in a system. I don't care whether it's a tight tank and they pump it monthly or yearly, whatever it requires, but it'll never, ever, ever get better unless we stop the pollutants from entering the water.
Right.
So I want to know what's the plan for that, because you can't fix the pollution.
Sure, and I see Ashley moving in. I mean, I will say, I absolutely don't disagree. And as, you know, when we work in water, you saw the graph, right? It's like 78% internal, 22% external. You need to be looking at both of those things and figuring out all of those elements. So we came, you know, Fuss & O'Neill, we're here tonight to kind of talk about this one sort of issue. But it's definitely a large issue, and it looks like Ashley's got some more to add.
So as you know, it's a multitude of issues. For the septic systems and anything around Santuit Pond, as you recall, we did do the survey of the 300-foot buffer of all units within that area and how they were functioning. And they're all coming to compliance to current Title V restrictions. So that's been done. That's the first step.
But
The
they're
next
not
step
complete.
is
Am I
they're not
correct? You're
complete.
still in the process.
They are still in the process.
How long have we been in the process?
I cannot answer that question.
okay.
So that's not my department, that's the Board of Health,
Sure.
and they've been doing that for a number of years. The other thing is sewering, but again, we are working towards that. And I mean, this is a step we can take now to reduce the resuspension of the sediments. That's why we're here tonight, to discuss that issue. As far as the swimming goes, we do have members from the public who swim in the pond in the winter months, and that's entirely safe. There's no active bloom. There's no bacteria levels that are elevated, and we do have residents that swim in the pond. So, just to clarify.
So Ashley, what's the going on with the alum treatment and how would this affect that?
Because that was
So-
voted down.
Yes.
Last meeting.
That was voted down last meeting. We are currently, so what was voted on at the last town meeting? The $450,000 was allocated for stormwater improvements and to look into and study the feasibility of the alum treatment.
All right, that's what
We've
it
already completed the feasibility study, or we're in the process of dosing and working with the SNEP network and ESS engineering to look at if that's a possibility. We have some positive feedback from them, but this is required for an alum treatment. So you want to make sure you're not resuspending the bottom and resuspending the alum that's actively working to suppress those nutrients at the bottom. You're going to have to limit the resuspension if you're doing an alum treatment as well.
Now, if they were to do the alum treatment, if that gets approved after your feasibility study, and I know that the Town Natural Resources Department's been working with the tribe to try and get the Army Corps of Engineers to come in and dredge. If they were to dredge after an alum treatment, would that essentially capture a significant amount of the
So, okay.
nutrients?
So we worked with the Army Corps of Engineers for over 3.5 years now. We've yet to hear any type of a study or a completed submission of a study. We're waiting, continually waiting. It's become dredging's not feasible for clean water for the Santuit Pond. The Army Corps has done continuous studies as far as sediment core sampling. The chemical makeup of the sediment doesn't meet sediment reuse, so a large majority of the pond cannot be dredged unless that spoil is disposed of at an off-site location or bagged and taken to a facility that we would have to choose. That's also a $200 million project that I don't think the town has an appetite to fund. There's portions of the pond that can be dredged, but if we do a twofold alum treatment and dredging, that's the plan moving forward. And if we can do that and receive support, we can remove nutrients through dredging and limit the nutrients from reactivating through inactivation treatment. So it's got to be, we're attacking at all angles here.
Michaela?
Just to bring us back to the presentation and the proposed bylaw, we're focusing right now on limiting the horsepower, right? Okay.
That will be a submitted article from my department.
Yep.
I'm not looking for support right now. I'm just here. This is a venue where we have a recording
Right.
that we can release to the general public so they can see what the rationale is behind the article submission, and it's just readily available to offer to members of the public.
So there are many, many things we can do, is what I hear you say. But for this presentation, we're going to focus on the horsepower. Okay, thanks. Thank you.
Carol? John, did you have any?
No, that's it.
Mr. Manager?
I think it's Diane. You had mentioned a few minutes ago that the town has options, I think was your quote, and I'm just wondering what you're specifically referring to, short-term versus long-term.
Sure.
Because I know that, and I think there's some folks here in the audience that are probably here for Santuit, and there's obviously concern. I'm just wondering what we can do collectively to address this, obviously, catastrophic situation immediately, because I think patience is wearing thin.
Sure. I mean, there are no quick solutions, which is part of the challenge, and that can be part of the frustration. Are there things that people can do? Sure. I mean, and I think especially through some of the programming that was done through the last MVP grant, some outreach to particularly neighborhoods around Santuit Pond to look at low-impact development and sort of homeowner practices to limit the potential for fertilizer, nutrient inputs into the pond. So certainly anybody who's in the direct watershed that has runoff going from their property into the pond, being smart about how, if you apply fertilizer, how you apply that, do you really need it? Maintenance of septic systems, which was brought up, earlier, is important as well. Those are all sort of small incremental pieces of looking at this. Ashley pointed to some of the larger ones, the studies that have been going on, looking at limited dredging, at alum treatment, all of those things, I think, are options.
Is the issue relative to the dredging, the cost? Because I remember speaking to Chucky Green about that, I think it was a year ago, maybe longer. And I'm just wondering, is the hurdle there the cost, or?
So what the project has turned into, instead, it's shifted from a water quality improvement project to a habitat restoration project. So the area that they're dredging is in and around where the herring run is. And they're proposing basically impounding sections of the pond with the spoils from the pond and creating artificial wetlands or man-made wetlands with that spoil. That would take down the square footage of the pond and the acreage of the pond with this artificial wetland with the spoils. And it could potentially be in the millions. So the cost sharing is 75% is through the grant program, but then the tribe and the town would have to come together and come up with the funds for the 25% match.
It was my understanding that they were reluctant to do it until you address the point source.
Correct.
Until you address the point source issue, then they weren't really to throw millions of dollars at something that's a temporary scab on a hemorrhage.
Yeah, they would not start or fund a project if there were not permits or in the groundwork to sewer the immediate area. Yeah.
So, as a follow-up to your question, Ronnie, I'm wondering, has Fussin O'Neill or the Natural Resources Department identified any funding that, there's more money out there right now through grants than we've seen in years. So I was wondering if there's any kind of climate adaptation funds or anything like that that could potentially help us meet some of those cost shares. Land and Water Conservation Fund, Clean Water Act, I don't know. There's a lot of different programs out there.
So we have applied through 604B, and that's the Federal Clean Water Act. We're going to apply once released to the 319 Federal Clean Water Act for projects in and around the Santuit Pond watershed. So there is funding out there, and we're aware, and working closely with Jason from the Tribe's Natural Resource Department.
Excellent.
Okay.
That's all I had. I'd like to open it up to some of the members that signed up for the public comment, and held off until their presentation. So I'll go in the order that they were signed up. Alan Waxman.
Hi, thank you. I'm Alan Waxman, 35 Santuit Pond Way, Unit 1D. I'm here primarily to talk about the horsepower limit and very strongly in favor of it, but there's a lot of other discussion that was going on with regard to overall phosphorus treatment in the pond. I'd be very happy to engage on that. I've been looking at this for decades now. Okay, so let me first point out that, as I said, I'm here to strongly support the limitation to 5 horsepower. I believe there are others in the room here who came in support of that as well. I don't know if you want to raise your hands. I'd also like to point out that, by the way, I provided a detailed memo. I hope you got a copy of that memo. Okay, so I'm not going to go through that whole thing, but I do want to point out that in terms of support, first of all, the Friends of Santuit Pond support this. I founded that in 2008. We were very critical in pursuing the Solarby solution for dealing with the internal phosphorus. The Save Mashpee Wakeby Pond Alliance fully supports this. Mashpee Ponds Coalition is a new group that I organized, supports this. The Mashpee Environmental Coalition, the Board of Directors voted to support this. And then you have the abutting homeowners. So residents of Beechwood Point condos, I live there. There are many residents who support this. Residents of Santuit Pond Estates, another abutting waterfront community, a number of those folks support this. Select multi-generational residents on Timberlane Drive support this. I'm not speaking for everybody, but for those who were able to respond. And finally, residents of Bryant's Neck community, I believe there's another presenter who will speak specifically to Bryant's Neck. Okay, so there is a great deal of support for this. In terms of the reasons for supporting it, okay, so as was stated, Santuit Pond is very shallow. Okay, treating shallow ponds is very different than deep ponds in dealing with phosphorus. Okay, I can get to that later if I have time, but I'm not going to have time, I guess. I want to point out that the mixing depth is really critical, and by limiting the engines and electric motors to no more than 5 horsepower, it'll ensure no disturbances to most of the sediments on the pond. I'd also like to point out that the motorboats create, the bow wave and the wake creates rocking hundreds of feet away, and that rocking disturbs anyone in small boats, and it creates erosion along the banks, particularly the northern segment. If you recall the map, it's very narrow. I've witnessed that over the last 15 plus years. Okay? Soil is eroding, and the soil brings more phosphorus into the water, as well as destroying some of the flora along the sides. Okay, so I guess I want to also point out that limiting engines and motors to 5 horsepower will not interfere with fishing on the pond. This is very common electric trawling motors used by most small fishing boats, 12-foot John boats, perfectly fine. It won't disturb the sediment. And finally, it's not unusual to put horsepower limitations on ponds on the Cape. For example, the town of Brewster, which I believe has the most ponds of any town on the Cape, has a 3 horsepower limit on all ponds, not just shallow ones, shallow and deep. And by the way, 3 horsepower is about the maximum you get from an electric trawling motor. So I think there are many reasons why this will help. And the key one that was explained by Fuss and O'Neill is that the motorboats with horsepower above, and actually if you look at the numbers and extrapolate back, 5 horsepower would give you a mixing depth of just about 5 feet, the average depth of Santuit Pond. Personally, I would go lower to 3 horsepower. But that resuspension of the top layer of this sediment is really a critical problem. Right now, and I want to point out, as was explained, both internal and external sources, if you look at the amount of phosphorus, the concentration in the pond, and the water volume, you can calculate how much phosphorus is in the pond as a whole. It is totally consistent with the estimate of external loading from the 2010 report by AECOM. Okay, so what does that mean? It means that the primary source, I believe,
Excuse me,
today-
Mr. Waxman.
sorry.
We've gone beyond the time.
Okay.
We have quite a few people. Hate to cut
Thank
you
you.
off. Be glad to talk with you offline further.
Absolutely. Okay.
It sounds like you have done your homework and are very informed. I'm open to input
Love to
from
have the
everyone.
opportunity.
But
Thank you.
I want to be fair to everyone else. Next one up, we have George Schmidt.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. George Schmidt, 17 Santuit Lane. I'm representing Bryant's Neck Association. You received a letter, which I just want to read into the record. There's a couple more signatures. We've actually got a hold of 17 out of the 23 possible people who could sign this. To the members of the Select Board, the undersigned are members of Bryant's Neck Association, owner of homes and cottages on the southern shore of Santuit Pond. Our members include both year-round and seasonal homeowners. Many of us belong to families that have owned properties on Santuit Pond for decades, back to the 60s. We are intimately familiar with the decline in the pond's water quality and the decline in the water quality in Mashpee's bays and estuaries over all these years. We write to express our full support for the proposed from the Mashpee Department of Natural Resources as submitted to the board to amend the town's bylaws to prohibit the use of internal combustion engines and electric engines in excess of 5 horsepower within the pond. With stated exceptions for government-owned and operated vessels, the amendment itself makes clear why the restriction is appropriate to help restore the pond's water quality and promote public health, and that's submitted by the pond. The comments that I got when going around talking about this, there were two. One was, I should add that a couple of the people that have signed this have boats that are over the 5 horsepower limit, and they're willing, to do what has to be done as far as be environmentally safe. Someone said, one person said it's going to decrease the value of our properties when we start doing this, and I would contend that based upon the article that was in the New York Times, that if we don't do something like this, the value of our properties are going to decrease even more. I thank you for your time.
Thank you, George. Next, we have Brian Everett.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Brian Everett, 77 Forest Drive, Mashpee.
Good evening.
Bryant's Neck was the one that held all the failed cesspools, correct?
There are cesspools.
Okay, that's just throwing it
I would
out
ask
there.
folks that do deliver public comment, direct comments to the chair, not to the audience. And
Okay.
let's-
I apologize.
No worries.
If boats or large motors are so harmful, why are we not banning them from all the bodies of water in Mashpee? Are we going to see a measurable effect on the water quality of the pond from this ban or restriction? When the town and consultants hosted a meeting at the pond in November, myself and a couple other neighbors also requested that a trash receptacle be installed and a more consistent police presence be put in place to enforce the dawn and dusk rules, excuse me, at the landing. To date, I have not seen any of this occur. Obviously, there's a lot of pollution down at the landing, a lot of people littering. I think it would also be beneficial, in my opinion, to install some do not feed the waterfowl signs at the pond. Waterfowl is consistently identified as a contributor to the degradation of water quality, and I witness people on a consistent basis feeding the wildlife there. The neighbors of Santuit Pond have suffered enough with the continual decline in the overall condition of the pond. Placing this restriction on the pond will cast additional undue burdens on the boat owners that enjoy the numerous recreational opportunities that this pond offers. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Jason Fisher. We'll go on to Joe Appleman.
Hello, my name's Joe Appleman, 91 Edgewater Road, Mashpee. Just a couple of quick points. First of all, the article in the New York Times basically sums up the problem, the septic systems, climate change, not warming waters, as was discussed earlier, overpopulation, nothing about boating, the situation with that, and the reality of the boating on Santuit Pond. Now, for the past 9 years, I'm the first person. In April, I put my boat in. I take my boat out in December. Basically, the reality is what makes this pond so special is even during the peak summers, there might be 3 to 5 boaters on the pond that are using the pond. Most people that are using the pond, there might be a couple of boats that are out there. They're putzing around, they're fishing, they're enjoying the scenery. And the thing that there's such a bad reputation with Santuit Pond. What I see, first of all, is when I cruise around, I see an incredible amount of scenery. There's an abundance of wildlife. Last summer, there was over 45 swans living on the pond. There are thousands of fish in there. There are turtles, there's otters. It's just, for those that live on it and experience it, it's an amazing place to live. And the point for the boating, the fishing, the recreation is such an important part of being in this area, of living on Santuit Pond. As I talked to Ashley, she was open-minded, and there might be some other issues and viable solutions to consider rather than just banning boating, the 5 horsepower. Perhaps they could be reducing engine speed. Perhaps we can, basically have a priority when the sewage line's dealing with Santuit Pond. Perhaps there can be some kind of grandfathering of the people that are on the pond, where those will still have the opportunity to take advantage. It's why a lot of us live on this pond. It's such a special place. And I think what was done 2 years ago is making a hell of a difference. Having everybody around the pond being able to clean their septic systems, repair it, and because it used to be October, November before the pond would be rejuvenated. The last 2 years, by September, it's amazing how tough this pond is, how it keeps coming back. You look out now, this is the way it is 9 to 10 months of the year. It's a beautiful, beautiful place. It's not, there's issues, of course, but it's not as bad as everybody's making it out to be. I swim in it 9, 10 months of the year. I only have 3, an extra ear in the back of my head. But, the point is, to take people's rights away, the boating issue, there's got to be some solutions other than 5 horsepower that I'd be willing to work with the town and the people who are concerned about this to try to come up with some solutions where everybody can be happy. That's my point. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Paul Canoni?
I'm Paul Canoni, 101 Edgewater Road. Well, I agree with if boats got eliminated off of our pond, it would devalue our property. And the reason I say that, I've asked different people, why did you buy a place on Santuit Pond? And their reason was, so I can go boating, and I can have a dock. Now, exactly how many docks, I don't know. There's probably 8 or 10, somewhere in there. But I just talked to somebody yesterday, and they just moved to Mashpee. They're on Timber Lane. And I asked him about, you going to put your boat in? He said, well, we just moved here. And I said, well, are you going to have a dock? He said, well, there's one down there right now, and it needs to be replaced. I said, I showed him the flyer that I had, and it said that boating might be disallowed if this goes through. And he says, "You're kidding." I said, "No, I'm not kidding." So anyway, that's one in particular. All right, so I have notes here, and I had to eliminate some of the things I was going to say because we've already been discussed. Now, the survey didn't say how much boat traffic there is on that pond. I live with my kitchen window facing the back, and I get a good idea of how much boat traffic there is. It's minimal, all right? Now, I understand that it only takes a couple of boats to stir up the silt, and that's a possibility, but I do not agree with that graph that was up there, that saying that 100 horsepower goes down 18 feet. It may do it right at the beginning when the boat starts to accelerate, but you can't convince me that it goes down 18 feet as that boat is planed out. No way. Maybe half that.
Please no heckling with the person
Somebody have
speaking.
something to say? Oh, it's you. Oh, I should have known. Anyway, so all right, except for a few bass boats on there, they do have tournaments 2 or 3 times a year. And at the most I've ever seen is 7 boats, maybe 8 tournament boats. And that's all usually on a Saturday. And they're buzzing around, going here and there, which is understandable. They spend $50,000 to $100,000 for these boats, so they want to use them. To take that away from the bass fishermen, that this is their outlet, this is the way they get rid of energy, and so that they have these boats, and it's great expense. I would never spend that much money for a boat, but one of the contributing factors over the years, because I've been here for 33 years, was the cranberry bogs. And they let the water in, they fertilize the areas, and they let the water back into the pond. Nothing was ever said to them that I know of. You know, they just polluted the water, and that was part of their business. Well, hold on. Recently, we had our septic systems done. It was 12/10/21 that we were forced to do it, which I didn't disagree with it. I said, well, whatever we can do to help the pond, that's great. So, I mean, I paid $850 to do that, and in a way, I'm glad to do it. And they did it all around the pond. Well, since then, I believe in my next-door neighbor, John Kabat, who he took readings of clarity depth, and as a matter of fact, I did it with him. I took him out in my boat this past spring. He believes that the water quality has already improved since we did the septic systems, which no doubt it probably has. I mean, if you have leakage in these old systems, I talked to somebody who did the inspecting just today, and he says they were leakage. They found septic systems that were leaking into the ground, and some right at the water level, what the ground level water was. So anyway, I'd like to suggest a proposal.
Mr.
Hello?
Cannoni, we still have a few more to go through.
What's that again?
We have a few more people to go after
All right,
you.
I just have
We
one
exceeded
last
the
thing to say,
time.
please.
If you could be quick.
All right. I suggest a proposal for a period of a couple of years, 2 years, so that we can determine whether or not the septic system are working. Put off this eliminating the boating for 2 years and see what happens to the water quality. That's basically all I have to say. But thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Next, we have Nathan Adams.
I'm Nathan Adams of 81 Edgewater Road. I find it unfortunate that everyone's concerned about the pond, and yet we're kind of working against each other. Because boaters we have the most to lose or win with the quality of the pond. And we know what the real causes of the problems are. It's the septic systems, it's the road runoff, and I didn't know about some of these projects. I think it's great that we're gonna do that. But now, we're told that boats are the problem, that they're kicking up the sediment. Well, if that's the case, well, then why can we not observe it? Now, as soon as I learned about this idea of banning boats, I really started paying attention. Not only, I'm right on the pond, I'm intimate with the boat traffic, and I care a lot about the quality of the water, so I'm always on it. For years, I've been that way. And when there's a lot of boats out there, the most recent bass tournament, I think it had more than 20 boats. And so I went out there and I looked at the water, got some glasses, filled them up, looked at the beginning of the day, went at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, went at noontime, and compared them all. Now, the water quality, the clarity was the same. And then I also, after learning that, well, we need to worry about the phosphorus resuspending, and you can't necessarily see that. Okay, fine. So I started testing for phosphorus, and guess what? There's no correlation between the boat traffic and the phosphorus levels in the pond. And I recognize that my science is rudimentary, but to say the least, of course, it's going to be flawed. But I haven't seen the DNR or anybody else do this kind of thing. And why is the onus on boaters to prove that our boats are good when we're not the ones proposing a change? This survey should be done in order to propose the change. If boats are the problem, well, then, at least just show us that it is. Now, and why should we do all this? I see where up here that we show pictures of a prop that churns up the water. Okay. Well, in this study, which is one of the ones that was referenced here, and we're basing our proposal upon, when a boat is going up and getting up out of the water, it doesn't kick up any more sediment at full speed as when it's putting around. 30 miles an hour, 3 miles an hour, it's the same. And that's based on not me, but this is the science that we're basing this whole restriction upon. And so that transition period, that's when the disturbance comes along. Also, in that same report, they conclude that anything beyond 1.5 meters, 1.8 meters, I believe it is, sorry, it's more like 2.5 meters, and that's about 10 feet. There's no disturbance at all. So I don't think that the 18-foot down is making any difference whatsoever. So it just depends on how you cherry pick the information, I believe. In that same report, they're saying that each lake is going to be different. Everything's going to be different. Depends on the type of sediment you have at the bottom and how it churns up. It depends on boat traffic. Because, of course, Santuit Pond, Joe touched on this, there's only 5 boats out there during a normal weekend. It's not Mashpee, Wakeby, where I shoot. There might be 100 boats out there running around. It's just, that's not the case on Santuit Pond. So you would expect that there's a correlation between boating and the traffic there and the water quality. There just isn't. And the thing is, we know what the real problems are, and we really do know what the solutions are. I can't wait to pay 20 grand to connect to the sewer, or someone tell me, all right, we're all gonna get denitrification systems. Great, I'll spend 50 grand, 20 grand, I don't care, because it's for the pond. So we could work together on the real solutions, but I feel like this is just a Band-Aid, a feel-good thing. It's not a tool in the toolbox. It's trying to make boaters, instead of working with us, we're going to be turned into the scapegoats. And I'm not on board for that. I'm not on board to be used as some pawn, a political pawn to make people feel better. I really truly believe that we can solve the problem by pursuing the real solutions like runoff and sewer, and let's go for the real solutions, not just the feel-good stuff. Thank you.
I appreciate your comments. Next, we have Paul Paceris. Paul Paceris. Moving on, we have Eric Horn.
Hello, thank you. Eric Horn, I live on 39 Timberlane Drive, right on the pond. Got a dock in my backyard. I've been living there for about not even a year and a half. And just to start, I haven't heard anything about any of this stuff. I know that there's a problem with the pond. Of course, I'm an avid fisherman. I noticed the problem with the pond. But as far as all this treatment and everything, I think the guidance for the homeowners on the pond has been very minimal. I haven't received anything. No fertilizer guidance, nothing in regards to how I can help. And I'm here, and I'm mostly here to support or not support this horsepower rating, because I grew up on the Cape. I used to fish this pond, same pond with my dad. And I grew up fishing that pond. So I don't know. I'm just a regular. I don't have any crazy scientific research or anything. I just care, and I think it's a good recreational source for the town. And I think I'd like to raise my kids boating on the pond. It's that simple. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Eric. So that was the last of the people that had signed up for public comment. So at this time, thank you for your presentation. Did the board have any further questions or comments for representatives? Thank you.
Andrew.
Andrew,
If I may offer some brief commentary.
sure.
Drew McManus, 51 Park Place Way. I don't live on Santua Pond, but I just wanted to offer up some additional comments in regards to this proposed restriction on horsepower. We recently discovered that Santua Pond, among many other water bodies, I'm sure on the Cape and throughout New England, has been infested in part with an invasive species called variable milfoil and bladderwort. And milfoil, for those who are not familiar with it, is a type of species that if it becomes cut up and dispersed in the water column, all it takes is one small fragment to reseed itself. So I think that in light of that situation, and also a variety of other factors associated with Santua Pond itself, the shallowness of the pond, and not just the stirring up of the phosphorus in the sediment, but also the impacts to erosion along the edges of the pond from exceeding boat wake activity, that I'm in favor of this restriction. It's not a ban. A lot of people have used the word ban tonight in their public comments, and it's not a ban. And I guess my biggest question for the board or recommendation to consider is how much is this really adversely impacting the ability to fish the pond by restricting horsepower? There's no restriction on fishing. There's just a restriction on horsepower. So just wanted to reiterate that and express my support for this article. Thank you.
Thank you, Drew. We're going to move on to,
On the left-hand corner.
ma'am?
I'm sorry, I did call today, but they didn't tell me. I asked to be on a list, but they never said I had the option to do that.
Oh, they usually leave it at the back door to sign up when you come in. If you want to come up, you will be the last one to provide public comment.
Thank you. Diane Shields, 51 Santuit Lane in Mashpee. I've been on Santuit Pond since I was 7 years old when the house was built. We always skied. We grew up aquaboarding. It was a great pond, and it's very close to my heart. We drove down from Situate tonight when we heard about this meeting at the last minute. I've heard both sides of the argument, and I heard the word scapegoat. Boating is being used as a scapegoat, and that is my position on this. We have septic issues, we have cesspool issues. The sewage needs to come in. We cannot save the lake by taking the boats off the lake. We need to take the sewage and put the sewage in. We never had a problem with the lake until Timberlane and Shields Road and all the development came in, and then everybody had to have the perfect lawn. That's what's destroyed our lake. Then we do have cesspools and septic systems, and I agree with the gentleman that said, I'll pay $20,000, I'll pay $50,000 assessment, bring sewage in. Let's fix the lake, but let's fix it the right way by not taking away boating and recreational activities on the lake. I grew up there. This is an important part of Santuit Pond. The wildlife on the pond is amazing. The sunsets are amazing. I have a photo albums of sunsets. Why take that away? We have a speedboat. We've had a speedboat for 50 years on that lake. We run it for sunset cruises. It has 115 horsepower, but we run it for sunset cruises. Let's not take that away. It's such a beautiful, beautiful pond. Let's do the assessment. Let's set the septic in. Let's fast track that. We'll pay the money. We'll pay the assessment. Thank you.
So we're going to move on to our next item. Thank you, Ashley and Fussin O'Neill, for your presentation. Discussion and approval of the following resignations. First one's Community Preservation Act, Dawn Thayer, Member at Large. Resignation to be effective February 13th, 2023. Term expires June 30th, 2023. I'd accept a motion at this time.
So moved with regret.
I'll second.
Hearing a first and second. Roll call vote. Michaela?
Yes.
Yes.
Tom? John?
Regrettably, yes.
Carol?
Yes, with regret.
And I'm a yes as well. That motion passes with a letter of regret to be sent. Next, we have Council on Aging, Virginia McIntyre, Member at Large. Term expires June 30th, 2024. I'd accept a motion to accept this.
So moved. Second.
Hearing a first and second.
With regret.
With regret. Any discussion on it? Hearing none. Carol?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
Yes.
Michaela? I'm a yes as well. That motion passes unanimously. Last, we have Planning and Construction Committee, Joseph Brait, Construction Representative. Term expires June 30th, 2023.
A motion to accept.
I'll second.
Hearing a first and second. Any discussion? Hearing none. Michaela?
Yes.
Tom?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
Carol?
Yes.
I'm a yes as well. That motion is unanimous and passes. Communications and correspondence, we have none. New business, we did have the one from Meredith Kilpatrick, and then there was something on the table tonight. New business, none. Old business, we have amended the discussion and approval of the letter to the Sandwich Board of Selectmen with regard to the NSG Village Green 1 project. This is an item continued from December 19th, 2022.
I read this letter that we're sending. Has anybody reached out to Sandwich on this project to find out what is going through on the Green project, Village Green? I mean, because this seems to be just something that has been in the paper. Is this something that's going forward in the town of Sandwich,
Town manager.
the project?
I have spoken with the town manager, and obviously the project is not finalized at this particular time. And over the course of my conversation, I just simply said that there may be some concerns over here relative to the trickle-down effect.
Right.
And he did invite me to have anybody who has concerns to contact his office, and he was going to set them up with, I think, somebody from planning and another person. So that's the only thing I can report.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, Michaela.
I heard back from, with your permission, I had called the town manager. after you had spoken with him, and I heard back from him today. And he voiced the same concerns, that he would keep us informed, that he appreciates our interest. I'm going to be meeting with Dave Mason and the town manager, just to find out how we can support the work that Sandwich is doing.
And Dave Mason's from Health.
Yes.
Okay. So we really don't need to send this letter. It's more of learning what they're doing.
May I?
Yes, Michaela.
I think the goal or the reason for sending the letter is actually, so the state has given preliminary approval, and the Sandwich Select Board wrote a 4-page unanimous letter. Everybody signed this letter to make clear their concerns. And I think the purpose of us sending the formal letter is for the Sandwich Town Hall to have this and for them to know that we share those concerns. Perhaps that will help to influence a state decision, might help to influence the fact that if this does go through, that there's a sewage treatment plant on the site, so we're looking at nitrogen,
Right.
an acceptable level. So that was actually the goal of moving forward with the letter.
Okay. So the town of Sandwich also has the same concerns.
Yes. We had I believe, a 4-page letter from the Sandwich Select Board that was sent to the state. So yes, they do. They have the very same concerns.
And I think, sending the letter just exercises our right under the agreement to chime in on projects being considered. So,
I wasn't up to speed, I just knew a little bit of it, so I wasn't, so, okay.
I didn't take any issues with the letter as written. As far as the content, did anyone else take issue with it?
No,
No, I mean, it treads lightly. It's, I hate to step into their affairs, but I think it just states that we're concerned.
concerned
and
about the groundwater.
I think it's fair.
And also, like I said, because there was the existing town agreement,
Yes.
it kind of puts them on notice that maybe that we're paying attention and they'll take a
Right.
closer look at projects and hopefully maybe include us with notices, so we don't have to do the digging. So thank you, Michaela, for bringing that forward. I'm trying to remember if we already voted to send that, correct? We were going to look at the draft.
I believe
so we're
you
voting
tabled
tonight?
it, or the board tabled it because there were 2 missing.
Because we were both missing.
And you, the board wanted to bring it back so that all 5 could vote on it. Am I correct?
Correct.
Okay, so I'd accept a motion to approve the sending of the letter as drafted at this time.
So moved.
Second.
Hearing a first and second.
Discussion.
Discussion?
The only thing I think is really important to include is that the letter has the unanimous approval of the board. I think that was very powerful in the Sandwich letter, and that could go at the end. And if I missed this, I apologize. I don't know that we talk about regional impact, and I think perhaps that's an important thing to add, maybe on page 2. That the 40.
Sound viable?
The development has
That can be
regional
added,
impact.
as long as the board agrees.
If everyone's all right with that, I'll
With that addition.
amend the motion to, we can amend the motion to include
provision.
comments as presented. And I'm not sure if we had a position on, who we're sending the letter to, if we were sending it to the state and the town, or just the town?
If you would like to specify that too, that's fine. I was just going to be sending it over to the
town.
board and/or the town manager.
That
I
sounds
think
fine
that's
with me?
appropriate.
Yeah, I think that's appropriate.
Okay, so if everyone's in agreement, I'll accept a motion to amend the base motion.
So moved.
Second.
Hearing a first and second. Any discussion on the amendment?
No, that's fine.
Hearing none. Carol?
Yes.
Yes.
John?
Yes.
Yes.
Kayla? I'm a yes as well. So Now we're voting on the base motion to include with edits as recommended by Michaela. And I'll take roll call vote. Michaela?
Yes.
Tom?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
Yes.
Carol?
Yes.
And I'm a yes as well. That motion passes unanimous. So next item we have is the additional topics. And then we have liaison reports. Any liaison reports?
Not at this time.
None at this time? Did you have any?
I do, from the Assembly of Delegates. They're looking at, they've been discussing, or they discussed last week, dedicating $11.4 million to housing, which will be dispersed in a competitive grant-funded way. So it's still being discussed.
Is this going to be for individual towns?
It'll go out for projects, so individual towns can
Towns
bring
projects.
projects that are shovel-ready to their attention. I think if we do have a project, it would benefit us to have somebody go and during public comment talk about that project.
What's
We'd have
the
to
date?
apply for the grant.
Say that to me
We'd
again.
have to apply for the grant.
We would. The funds haven't been dedicated yet. There wasn't a vote taken. But it was interesting to me that there were two groups who were there to talk about the fact that if this was approved, they wanted to discuss their project.
Who were the groups?
Carol, I'd have to look through my notes.
Okay. It'd be interesting to know who were the groups that were there.
But the loan funding is still not approved.
It's not approved yet. no.
That's it.
Disappointing.
Next, we have water quality updates. Under this matter, we have discussion and approval of the Select Board Representative Cape Cod Water Protection Management Board.
Yeah. If I may,
Michaela?
I also have a statement I'd like to read.
Sure.
If that would be okay? All right. We've talked a lot tonight. People have said we've been discussing water quality for a long time, and I agree. We have definitely been discussing this for a long time. I really have a call to leadership for all of us who are sitting at this table, including myself. Anybody in the country who read the New York Times realizes that we're going to have a water crisis, that we're really in a mess. This shouldn't surprise us, as some of the residents who spoke pointed out. We've had this data for years and years, and we've made progress. I'm not taking away from any of the progress we're making. I don't think it's time to put the brakes on, though. And more recently, just in this past year, June 16th, 2021, the Conservation Law Foundation filed suit against the town because we continue via Title V septic systems to flush human waste into our water, effectively killing everything there but algae. September 19th, right here, Ray Jack came up. He showed us a picture he had taken from Sandalwood of the Mashpee River, and he explained, and these are Ray's words, not mine, if you flush that toilet today, the fish will be swimming in it tonight. Then he said, I can assure you that's not far from the truth. October 3rd, the late Dr. Brian Howes, world-renowned environmental scientist, informed us about the deteriorating quality of our water. He told us there's clear evidence, and I'm quoting him, that declines are due to nitrogen enrichment. Then he explained, increasing, and again, quoting Brian Howes, increasing the buffer zones is really important. Most recently, I'm not going to read what I have about the New York Times article because you all read it and we've heard enough about that tonight. The New York Times story has been picked up by media all across the country. I mean, we are definitely in a crisis. And at the time of crisis, I think we need leadership around this table. I think we hear leadership from the pond groups. I think we need to act. Most importantly, as leaders, we owe our future generations water that sustains life. I don't think anybody could dispute that. Additionally, we have to address the current economic implications of our water problems. Who's going to vacation here if we don't address water quality with urgency? Also, what will happen to our property values? What will happen to our tax base? How are we going to pay for things if we don't have a substantial tax base, if we lose money? And if the real estate market collapses, what's going to happen to the residents, many of whom work in that industry, and the financial institutions that that industry supports? In this town, we don't agree on everything. I know that. And that makes for good discussion. But I know we all want and we all deserve clean and healthy water. And we who live here want to do best for the town. So I know to fully address all our water issues is going to cost a fortune. I'm cognizant of that. We all are. We can't afford to sewer all of Mashpee within the next few years. We can't place that expense on Mashpee residents, many of whom are struggling to stay in their homes. But you know what? We can act. And we can act to immediately improve our water quality in ways that cost taxpayers nothing. I think we need a call for actionable and measurable items, and I'm asking for us to move on that action. So here are some items that I'm asking us to move on. The first one is to approve the clean water bylaws for inclusion on the May 2023 town warrant, and to let the residents of Mashpee vote, let them decide. They've all read these articles too, and they know they're being impacted by the quality of our water. These bylaws include an increase in the buffer zone, which is a recommendation of Dr. House, and a ban on residential fertilizer. And we've heard a lot about that from residents on Santuit Pond tonight. I think the select board, all of us, me included, needs to act on this with urgency. On September 12th of last year, and I looked, it was 119 days ago. That's half a school year. It's more than half a school year. Our select board stated that residents needed more explanation and more education about the bylaws. We need to develop a concrete educational plan, and I'm calling on us to make sure this happens. With the approval of this board, I would ask that the town manager assign this task to town employees who are capable and have the requisite expertise. Then they can bring this to the next select board meeting, whatever they put to paper, and get the support of this board. I don't think we can wait. Mashpee is unique in that we have both the town and we have the Wampanoag tribe. Working together, which I think we can do, the town manager, his designees, all of us on the select board, representatives from the tribe, I think we'll be able to develop a clear and cohesive watershed plan to address water quality, to have that on paper and to share it with people. We can elicit the support of consultants, if approved and if necessary, to ensure a comprehensive and detailed plan for removing nitrogen and phosphorus from our waters. And we need to act with urgency. We've talked a lot. We need to act. We need to work with the towns like Sandwich who share our watershed. We talked a little bit tonight. We know we have an intermunicipal agreement with both Barnstable and Sandwich, and that's actually on the water agenda. We need to call this group to action. I think it's critical. When the state comes in, if the state DEP comes in and tells us we need to meet benchmarks, I think we want to be ready with people who are in our watershed to do that. I also think we need to develop a clear and cohesive plan to work together as thoughtful leaders ourselves in town, and then also with leaders in neighboring towns to seek and secure state and federal government funding to address water quality on the Cape. We'll have a lot more power working together to ask for funds to help us solve this problem. I also am asking that we communicate our ongoing progress as well as the challenges we have, because I don't think this is going to be easy. It's easy to read about it, it's harder to do, and I understand that. But I think the residents, and we heard people say this tonight, the residents of Mashpee really want to know what's happening. They want to be educated, and they want the clear facts from us. I think we owe that to the residents. These actions will require collective leadership. As I look around the table, I know we are all capable of working together collectively, collaboratively, and to pull together the leadership we need to move ahead. We owe this. We truly do owe this leadership to our residents. And I look forward to working with all of you, and I hope we can make some movement on those issues. Thank you.
So the Cape Cod Water Protection Management Board,
Yes, Carol.
you need a
that's,
select board member to be,
The next item is we're going to select, discuss and approve or make a motion to approve a select board representative to the Cape Cod Water Protection Management Board.
Mr. Chair, I would
Yes.
be interested, I have both the energy and the time to serve on that board, and the interest.
Motion to.
Is
To approve.
anyone else interested?
I think Michaela's
Don't
got the
trip over
energy.
All right, so I'd accept the motion to nominate Michaela
moved.
to the
Second.
board. Hearing a first and
Yes,
second,
yes,
any
yes.
discussion?
Oh, I think we're jumping the gun here. All of a sudden, we've had one discussion on this, and I think we ought to pump the brakes a little bit and have a further conversation with the board. This is something that I was totally unaware of until just now, and I think that it would make better sense if we have a conversation, figure out where we're at. There's a lot that's going on within the community, in each of the communities, not just the town of Mashpee, but the abutting towns. You know, without knowing what the other hand's doing, I think we ought to slow down, reach out to the others, find out where we're at, and see what their plans are. If we're working together,
So we can.
let's work
Tom,
together.
this is a vote to appoint Michaela
Michaela to the
as
council.
a
Watershed.
representative, so that it's information gathering.
I'm just saying we don't need to put another representative. I think you're already on the assembly, so you can work with the association of the 15 communities. So that gives you your foot in the door, so we can find out where we're at. And
Okay.
I'm just thinking that it makes better sense to have a game plan as a whole, not appoint anybody at this time.
Okay.
This is a position that does exist.
It's already,
Yeah, it's a vacant.
we just need to
Position.
assign a selectman.
May I? This became vacant when Andrew Gottlieb
Andy
resigned.
left.
So this position actually puts us in the situation where we'll know when funding is available, and we can, move forward. I'm not asking to make decisions for the board. I would certainly bring everything back here. We need a representative.
That's all it is.
It's
It's
information
just to give
gathering.
representation, which we haven't had since
Keep your ear to the ground.
the guy in the back
That's all it
left.
is.
Since Andy vacated, there's been no representative on this commission.
So we're actually doing
So
a
we're just
disservice
having,
by not
we're just in a
filling
tough
the
position. You know what I mean?
So, hearing those considerations, I'll take a roll call vote on this. Carol?
Yes.
Yes.
Tom?
No.
Michaela?
Yes.
And I'm a yes as well. That motion passes, appointing Michaela to the position as a representative. Next, we have discussion and approval of Select Board Representative Intermunicipal Agreement, Papaneset Watershed.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, ma'am.
I would like to volunteer for that position as well. I've talked to people in Sandwich. Clearly, I'm not going to go rogue and do something on my own. I would like to be able to meet with the team. It's a working team that hasn't been working together for quite some time. The team from Mashpee is actually the point person. We're the agent for this, and we're supposed to be the ones who are helping this to happen. So there's a working group, and as I said, they haven't met for some time. The working group would consist of the town manager or his designee, an expert in the town, and a select board member. So once again, I'm not asking to go rogue, but I do have the expertise, I have the energy, and I have the time.
This involves the potential wastewater treatment center?
Yes, there hasn't been any meetings recently, to my knowledge.
It's
the Papaneset watershed.
Oh, okay.
I don't want to work at the
Different
Cape Cod
thing,
wastewater.
That's the next one. Second.
Hearing a first and second, any discussion? Hearing none. Michaela?
Yes.
Tom?
Yes.
I'm a yes. John?
Yes.
Yes.
Carol, yes. That one's the appointment to the intermunicipal agreement, Papaneset Watershed, Michaela, representative, is unanimous by all present. Discussion and approval of letter to support special legislation with regard to Joint Base Cape Cod Wastewater Solutions.
I make a motion to support this special education legislation letter with regard to the joint base wastewater.
And if I could, Mr. Chair, just to fill the board in on this was a request from Bud Dunham, or George Bud Dunham, the town manager in Sandwich. He requested this from me, and I said that I was going to bring it before the board for approval to send.
Sounds good.
I made the motion to.
I second the motion.
Hearing a first and second, any discussion on this? Carol?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
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 Michaela? I'm a yes as also, so that letter, that support letter is unanimous. Town manager updates?
Yes, I am pleased to report that I have been officially notified that one of the last official acts of the former governor was to sign off on the bill for you to be the select board.
Nice.
So this was official on the 5th of January, I believe it
So
was.
now we're a select board member.
We've been referring to you as select board, but obviously we had some technical glitches along the way, but I can happily report that this is official. So I just wanted you to know what your official distinction is. I think I can also say that the town planner right now is in a decision-making process. It's public information. But in that spirit, I know that he was working on a community block grant. The objective was to access funds in low to moderate income range regarding cost of their connections. This project area is phase 1 in scope. It was identified with the state that it's eligible and fundable in terms of the project itself. The planner did consult with the town of Barnstable because they are running a similar project, and it does require income verification and other program monitoring along the way that may be suited for a partnership. The planner has recommended that we get in contact with HAC. One of the options is the select board authorizes a grant submission and application. Another option is a staffer working with HAC could coordinate. We've got about approximately, and I'm not sure that this is an actual figure, so I just want to caution you on that, about 440 homes and about 35%, which is 110 or thereabouts, would qualify. In 2 years, Barnstable has only had 2. The deadline is, and I know Michaela wants the deadline, it's March 3rd, 2023. So regardless of his status, he has assured me that there will be information that will be primed and ready well before the deadline and well before he makes any decision relative to his future.
Okay, good.
Appreciate it. If that's it, I don't see anything on the executive session.
Motion to adjourn?
Second.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Is there a call to vote?
Yes. All those in favor, say aye. Aye. Aye.
Aye.